I suppose it's only the small matter now to move on to a 50-year-old Macallan. So let's just get straight to it, shall we? So dram 4, the penultimate dram of tonight's tasting, is a 1969 Macallan cask sample. It's a 50-year-old Macallan. I'll just let that sink in for a minute and just prep myself for it. Which one's that? That's this dram here. A revered whisky, never out of the spotlight for one reason or another, for better or for worse, shall we say. Let's leave it at that. And it's by far and away the most sought after brand on the secondary market at auction, in other words. Bottles of Macallan regularly fetch eye-watering prices, and it's currently the world record for the most expensive bottle of whisky sold at auction is a 1926 60-year-old Macallan. Went for a cool £1.5 million a few months ago. So we're in that sort of realm here with a 50-year-old, aren't we? It's quite extraordinary. Established in 1824, it's one of the original Speyside farm distilleries. So 1824 was simply the year that Alexander Reid bought a distilling license in response to the 1823 Excise Act. But there was distillation happening on the site for many years prior to that official establishment date. It passed into the hands of James Stewart in 1868, and then a big famous transaction in 1892 when it became it was under the ownership of the Victorian distilling giant Roderick Kent, who at the time owned Talisker distillery on Skye as well. It stayed in Kent's family for decades and decades, and generations, all the way through many descendants, right up until as recently as 1996, when the distillery was bought by Highland Distillers, what we now know as Edrington. It was expanded several times from an initial 2 curiously small stills in a wooden shed. The current brand new distillery, a £140 million development that opened a couple of years ago now. It's gone from 2 stills to 36 stills. It's a huge operation. It's a remarkable site. I had the privilege of being there in company of David Sinclair a couple of months ago with the team from Royal Mile Whiskies to go around that site, and it really is something. And the Easter Elkie's house as well is just a fantastic place to be in. Back to this whisky in the 1960s, when this whisky was distilled, there wasn't 36 stills there was just 7, so not too many. And when we think about the 1960s in general, the 1960s are really this legendary decade in Scotch whisky. Some of the most revered, highly sought after, just utterly brilliant whiskies were created during this decade. A few spring to mind for me. The late Silvano Samaroli bottled arguably 2 of the best whiskies ever, a 1967 Lafroig and a 1966 Bowmore Bouquet. I've tasted the Bowmore but not the Lafroig. Absolutely incredible liquid, incredible stuff. Look at 1964, that's when the white and black Bowmores were distilled as well. The black Bowmores were released over several different editions from the early 90s until just a few years ago. I think it was 5 different editions of the black Bowmores. And also possibly a whisky that not many people know about, really. It's a Port Ellen. It was a Port Ellen 12-year-old that was released in 1980. So it would be a 1967 or 68 distillate. And it was released to commemorate the Queen's visit to the Port Ellen maltings in 1980. I've read some stories that there was a Port Ellen bottle at that time, not really, but because Oban was owned by the same company, I think the DCL back then, old Oban bottles were used, the sort of diamond-shaped ones, if you're familiar with old Oban bottles. Those were used to fill this 12-year-old Port Ellen, and that is some of the most astonishing Port Ellen that I've had the pleasure to taste as well. With this whisky, though, with the 1960s, there's 2 things that I kind of want to highlight with this Macallan. Those of you that have got the dram packs and everybody else that's watching, you will be familiar with this brand and no doubt tasted multiple expressions from it. In the 1960s, the barley variety, it's definitely Macallan, but also elsewhere, was Golden Promise, this sort of legendary barley variety that lent a fantastic depth of flavour and very viscous mouthfeel to the spirit that was created using that variety. That was created in 1965 by firing some gamma rays at barley to induce mutations which would increase yield and also develop resistance to bugs and other pests as well. And Golden Promise replaced previous varieties such as Zephyr, Kenya, and Proctor. And if you're not familiar with sort of barley and the Scotch whisky industry, that's an ever-evolving part of the industry as well. Barley strains come in and out of fashion as the years go on. They come in because their yield is very, very good, so we get more litres of spirit per tonne of barley. But then over time, with genetic drift and mutations in the bugs and parasites that like to feed on the barley, they will lose the resistance to those bugs, and so new strains have to be developed in order for us to be able to use barley to make whisky with. And the Golden Promise was used exclusively, or almost exclusively, possibly exclusively at Macallan until 1994, but it was mixed with other strains, likely chariots, I imagine, at the end of the 20th century. And when I was reading about Golden Promise, I went down an absolute rabbit hole. It's amazing what you can find on Google nowadays. I found two quotes that I will read out to you tonight about this and about Golden Promise and Macallan. One, a short quote from Ian Banks and his Raw Spirit book, which was published in 2003. He says, Golden Promise has become hard to get hold of over the years, and even Macallan has had to resort to other varieties, using only about 30% Golden Promise since 1994. So we know that they were using Golden Promise for this whisky in the 60s when it first came into the industry, right the way up till then. But like I say, they had to mix it with other varieties to keep their yield up. A rather more amusing quote that I managed to find is from the wonderful writer, the late Michael Jackson, writing in his column in the Independent newspaper from 1994. He wrote, Macallan whisky emerges from the still. It already has a decidedly rich character, even before it has been aged in sherry casks. Sherry casks is what we'll come back to in a sec. Not long ago, a batch limped out with none of this voluptuousness. In a blindfold tasting, I was able to spot the lesser spirit, no hesitation. The company almost dismantled its distillery, searching for a mechanical fault that might have diminished the spirit, but could find nothing amiss. Then someone suggested looking in the malt barn. A supplier had quietly given the distillery a 50-50 blend of Golden Promise and a widely used but lesser variety. Even at this ratio, the whisky was unsaleable as the Macallan. That's a great excerpt from his newspaper column in 1994, showing just how much focus Macallan in particular put on their barley strain. Indeed, nowadays they own a particular barley strain that they grow on the estate. Over the years, obviously a lot of changes have been made to their main barley variety, but their estate heritage range has gone from Golden Promise, which was grown at the distillery at this point in the 60s, through to Minstrel and then Momentum. And likely nowadays they'll use Concerto as their main malt that they'll buy in from industrial maltsters. But if they've not already moved, they will move soon, much like a lot of the industry already has, to new strains of barley such as Diablo or Laureate. So it's ever changing. I mentioned the sherry casks there as well. With this robust, oily spirit, I mean, you look at Macallan and you look at the very, very small stills, the really sharp descending line arms, that gives rise to a very oily, very heavy, very muscular spirit, ideal for maturing in sherry casks for a long period of time. And everybody thought, a lot of people thought, that Macallan only matured in sherry casks. As you can see tonight, 1969, this is from a refilled bourbon hogshead. Not the case at all. I suppose that really first came out with the launch of the Fine Oak range in 2004, which contained a range of whiskies, up to 30 years old, and each of those expressions had whiskies matured in bourbon casks and in sherry casks, batted together. So if you had a 30-year-old in 2004, that means that we're filling into bourbon since at least 1974, and as this shows, since at least the late 1960s, 1969. I'm not sure if any of the Macallans in Leith, the Pillars collection, I'm not sure if that contains any bourbon matured Macallan. If you know, do comment and let me know. But this is, yeah, late 60s they were filling into bourbon, so not a lot of people would expect that. So this is the cask sample. It's a pleasure to taste Macallan from this revered 1960s era. In 1969, when this whisky was filled into cask, this is how long this cask has been sitting around, just to put it into a bit of nostalgic context. We put the first man on the moon, Neil Armstrong, in 1969. The legendary Woodstock Music Festival took place in 1969 in New York State. The Beatles' last public performance happened in this year, and it was also the year that Monty Python was formed as well. In terms of films, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, cracking film that was. And in terms of music, we had Marvin Gaye, I Heard It Through the Grapevine, and we had Frank Sinatra with My Way, and we had The Who with Pinball Wizard. So you look at those iconic events that happened in the world, those films, those songs, that music, that was what was being released into the world when this whisky was being laid down, or the spirit was being laid down into cask. I'm very excited to try this. I know there's a few smiles around the room, people that have already tried it. God, it's just different gravy, as somebody's saying. So very waxy and oily. I mentioned sort of beeswax, that sort of thing, maybe a bit of linseed oil, something like that, aromatic waxes and oils. God, there's lots of fudgy caramel notes, but at the same time, we're moving into really strange territory of parchment and dry leaves and lots of fermented fruits. Dave Roon talks a lot about rancio notes, a style of aromas and flavour descriptors that are highly, highly sought after in aged cognac in particular. If you think of, you know, antique mahogany and old houses and fermented fruits and sort of mushroomy vegetal notes and all sorts of things, this for me, this tropical fruit really fermented sort of pineapple, sort of black banana, cooked apple, all of that sort of stuff. A lot of poached fruits as well, maybe some poached pear, apricot, all that sort of thing. There's a million things going on here. I could nose this whiskey probably until midnight and keep coming out with descriptors. I'll save you from that. I'm not gonna. Those of you that have this in front of you, I hope you're enjoying it. I know I'm about to. This is certainly one to keep the glass. I have a sip just now, come back to it in 15 minutes, half an hour, 45, and come back to it every now and again over the course of the next 2 hours. I have no doubt that this whiskey will evolve quite a lot over the next 2 hours. As you see, I just poured my sample there. And so I'll be nosing and tasting this until we get kicked out of the Leith Spirits warehouse later on tonight. Crikey. God, that's remarkable stuff, isn't it? Really fruity, really herbal spice. We're looking at things like fennel, touch of camphor, caraway seeds, that sort of thing. The fruits there, the oak influence. It's a refill hogshead. I'm not quite sure if I gave you all the details on this. It's filled in October of 1969. Sample was drawn last month, so that's 50 years old. Refill hoggy, and unsurprisingly, it's the lowest ABV of the evening. It's very, very old, 50 years old. So the Angel has taken a fair bit. It's down at a natural cask strength of 42.8%. So that's all the details on the spec on that one. Again, for me, given the markedly lower natural cask strength in this one, it's down at, like I say, 42%. I'm not going to add water to this one. I really don't think it needs it. This is a liquid that really just isn't about whiskey. It kind of transcends that. It's from the 1960s. It's from arguably the most revered distillery in the country. and that's just a joyous liquid, an absolute joy to taste. Those of you that have dram packs, like I say, do comment, let me know what you think of this one in particular. In the last fortnight or so since we released the dram packs for this tasting, I know a lot of you sent messages, you've commented on stuff I put on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and stuff about how much you're looking forward to this. So do let me know if it's lived up to your expectations. It certainly has lived up to mine. I think that's extraordinary liquid. That's sort of a liquid time capsule, really. Incredible stuff. So, yeah, right, I suppose we better conclude the tasting. What time are we at now? We're at 8:30. Right. Right, so, got Stevie Martin, thanks very much. Thanks for 1973 Jura on site. Sample in the post, Stevie. Yeah, thank you very much for that. I'm going to keep enjoying the whiskies. I'll be here for a good few minutes. Like I say, I'm not rattling through these whiskies, but I'm giving you a bit of chat. Feel free to go and rewind and replay the video at your leisure once it goes on to the video page on the EWB Facebook page. We'll be here enjoying these drams and possibly one or two more for a little while after the tasting. So keep commenting, keep the chat going, and I'll get back to you all as much as I can. Like I say, I'm going through this at a decent pace. Take your time, and I'll do my best to get back to you with all your questions and comments as the evening goes on. Now we're off back to Islay, I suppose, for the final whisky, and we're off to Caol Ila. So with Caol Ila, established 1846, again a very, very old distillery, established by Hector Henderson on the northeast coast of the island, very close to Port Skeg. Its neighbours now are sort of neighbours, Bunahab, I suppose, and Ardnahoe, very new distillery as well. It's gone through multiple owners right away through the 1800s until eventually ended up in the ownership of the DCL. I've mentioned them a lot tonight. The DCL, the precursors to Diageo. There was a lot of merging and absorbing of family-owned or privately owned distilleries into this conglomerate, really around about and just after the First World War. And in the 20s, there was a lot of closure. So Caol Ila was closed in 1927. It remained closed for most of the 30s, still now and again. And obviously, it was closed during World War II. But after the war, that's where it really hit its stride. It was in almost a continuous production from the end of the war until 1972, where it was demolished, completely rebuilt as a much larger distillery. It went from 2 stills to 6. This made it the largest distillery on Islay in terms of production. And the main reason for that is that the parent company, so DCL back then, owned Johnnie Walker, the biggest selling Scotch coming out of our country. So it moved also at that time, after the rebuild, from sourcing its malt, from malting its own barley on site, to sourcing it from the Port Ellen maltings just down the road on the south shore of the island. So there's almost this dichotomy with Caol Ila of pre-old style Caol Ila, pre-expansion, and new style Caol Ila, post-expansion. And this is from not long after it expanded. The old style, I've had the privilege of tasting a couple of 1968s, I think, and they aren't as coastal or as clean or as citrusy as contemporary Caol Ila. They remind me a lot more of the Caldalton malts, the whiskies in South Shore, Lagavulin, Lafroy, and Ardbeg. They've got a real, not aggressive, but real robust, ashy peat smoke to them. Very tarry, quite medicinal as well. A lot of iodine and seaweed notes and things like that. So you can almost split Caol Ila into 2 parts there, pre and post expansion. Interestingly, since it started sourcing its malt from Port Ellen, the malt spec is exactly the same, but very, very similar to the malt spec that is given for Lagavulin. And you'll know, and I know, if you have a Caol Ila and a Lagavulin side by side of equivalent age, matured in a similar cask type, and somebody says, which is the smokiest? Everybody's going to say the Lagavulin because it is. The reason that you get this real difference, a much lighter, cleaner style of smoke in Caol Ila nowadays compared to Lagavulin, is really threefold. There's longer fermentations at Caol Ila, I believe. They also have higher cut points, but they cut earlier, leaving a lot of phenols in the base of the spirit still. We go into the cup that goes into cask. There's much taller stills as well, so less of the phenols make it over the swan neck. So these three things combined reduce the phenolic content in the new mixed spirit, meaning that even though you start with identical or very, very similar barley at these two distilleries, you end up with very different new mix at the end of it. Now in the 1980s, there was a huge economic downturn. A lot of you will know there was a huge number of closures, particularly between 83 and 85, due to the economic downturn. And so what happened at Caol Ila, there wasn't as much of a demand for lots and lots of smoky whisky, but there was still a bit of a demand for unpeated or unsmoky whisky, again, like we talked about with Bruichladdich, to go into blending, really to go into Johnnie Walker, to go into other things. And because Caol Ila was such a big distillery by this point, post-expansion, it had the ability and the capacity to create smoky and unsmoky whisky at a really good volume year-round. It was also a good reason to keep the distillery open that had not long been heavily invested into. And that batch of unpeated spirit happens yearly, happens to this day. I think the first bottling of unpeated, or what was called Highland style, Caol Ila came out as an 8-year-old in Diageo's special releases in 2006. And it's been released ever since. I think gone up to certainly 17. I think an 18-year-old was released a couple of years ago as well, which is really clean and coastal, a completely different side to the distillery compared to the very, very smoky whisky that we normally associate with Caol Ila. The distillery is currently undergoing another big expansion, and it's going to become the Islay home of Johnnie Walker. Diageo are investing, I think it's £150 million in the Johnnie Walker brand, with the flagship here in Edinburgh, in the West End, in the old House of Fraser building. That's going to be the home of Johnnie Walker here, and they've picked 4 distilleries around the country to be I think it's the 4 pillars, calling it the 4 sort of cornerstones of the Johnnie Walker story, and Caol Ila is going to become the Islay home for that brand. I've seen the plans, I'm sure a lot of you have as well, in sort of whisky media and elsewhere. It looks really quite fantastic. There's going to be a bar that overlooks the sound of Islay, the stretch of water out front of the distillery. That's where Caol Ila takes its name from. Caol Ila in Gaelic means sound of Islay. And you're going to be able to access the distillery in through one of the warehouse roofs, which is one of the more inventive ways, I think, of walking into a distillery that I can think of. So from the car park, you're going to walk over a swing bridge into the roof of a warehouse and down into the distillery, which, yeah, that's going to be quite something to see. I can't wait to go and visit that. But with this whisky, it is a 1980s. I did talk about the unpeated style coming into play in the 1980s. This is not. This is very much finishing on a smoky whisky. Definitely a peated variant that we've got here. So it's a 1983 vintage against a cask sample, drawn. Well, this one was drawn in February, actually. So we're at 36 years old against a refill hogshead. Again, possibly for me the most ideal type of cask for long, slow, gentle maturation. And the current cask strength is 53.5%. So that seems to be a bit of a theme tonight, 53%. So we'll get on to the Caol Ila, and we'll look at 1983. Yeah, this is not that clean and coastal, this is still a bit of a brute. Quite medicinal as well. Yeah, good. What's going on there? I'll get to that in a second. Feel free to nose and taste at home, let me know what you think of this Caol Ila. What kind of, if you're into smoky whisky, how it compares to other Caol Ilas. I think the closest I've tasted to this was a 35-year-old that came out as one of the special releases a year, 2, 3 years ago, something like that. So it's great to taste that cask sample. So 1983, Mario Brothers video game was launched, Fraggle Rock debuted, and Microsoft Word was released for the first time as well. Things that we all take for granted nowadays, Microsoft Word. Films of the year, Terms of Endearment, Flashdance, and of course, Star Wars Return of the Jedi. And to music, some absolute 80s classics here. We had Billy Joel with Uptown Girl, we had Culture Club with Carnal Chameleon, we had Bonnie Tyler, Total Eclipse of the Heart, and we had Michael Jackson as well. So those are the sorts of things that were happening in the world when this whiskey was the spirit was being made down into cask. Yeah, really quite a medicinal opening actually. Lots of iodine seaweed, sort of elastoplast, sort of first aid box, and you get that sort of hospital smell, antiseptic smell. It's not just because I've got some sanitizer in front of me. And then the smoke comes through, and it comes through with some of that more sort of contemporary Caol Ila-ness that I associate. A lot of that sort of lemony, limey, sort of real clean citrus, sort of smoked lemon, possibly something like that. Very herbal as well, really heathery, herbal tinctures and ointments, embrocations, that sort of medicinal oily thing. Oh, that's good. Oh, that doesn't take any prisoners, does it? That's a big whiskey. Beautiful. Quite mineralic as well, sort of pink sea salt, sort of brine, that sort of thing going on as well, but mineralic at the same time. Again, a classic hallmark of old Caol Ila. I really taste. We'll add some water. Just a wee drop. See how it changes it. Yeah, it freshens it up, certainly freshens it up. That citrus comes much more to the fore. Those medicinal notes and those coastal notes really push forward now. Sort of beach bonfire sort of thing. Driftwood, sea spray, sort of rocks, oyster shell, crab creole, you can go all down that route. Not too far from New Haven Harbour from where we are, so it reminds me of that quite a bit. Beautiful stuff. God, what a tasting that was. Fantastic. So, that almost concludes tonight's chat. Feel free to enjoy these whiskies for the rest of the evening. They will keep opening up, keep giving new things up to you on the aroma and on the palate. If you want to, instead of commenting on the stream, if you want to tweet me or send something on Instagram or whatever, I'm at Edinburgh Whisky, all one word, at Edinburgh Whisky. Thank you all for tuning in, for commenting, for asking questions, for asking who I'm wearing tonight, and all that sort of stuff. Again, a huge thanks go to those of you who bought the dram packs. Like I say, every single penny on the sale of those dram packs goes towards continued production of this little guy here, the Leith Spirits C19 lethal Leith Al hand sanitizer. I hope you've enjoyed the whiskies as much as I have, and if you've been dramming along at home with something else, I hope you've at least found the chat bearable. If anything, it just took your mind off some of the things that are going on outside for a little while. Huge thanks to Derek, obviously, for donating the whiskies to this tasting, to Greg for all the digital setup and looking after the stream, and to Tim, obviously, for managing the comments, passing on your questions and such like. You'll have noticed these aren't the only whiskies that we've got tonight. There's a fantastic liquid library behind me, dozens of bottles just waiting to be opened. Hopefully once lockdown is lifted and we're able to share a dram together, not just virtually, but actually in person. The space down here can be used for all manner of things. These whiskies aren't just going to sit there, gather dust and look pretty. They are going to be opened, and I think it's time for a wee celebratory dram for closing up the tasting. I had a scan across the back shelves earlier this evening before we started the stream, and there's, you know, it's a sweet shop back there for somebody like myself and for a lot of you guys watching. But what am I going to pick off that shelf? And I've picked up something that is just old school, proper sherry, robust, muscular, meaty, brutal, unapologetic whiskey, and it's this bottle here. It's a 12-year-old bottled in the 1980s by Gordon MacPhail. You can see this as part of their distillery labels collection here. A lot of you will have seen bottles like this, so I think it's maybe about time that a little celebratory dram. We're not quite closing up the tasting though, not quite yet. We were all thrilled. It deliberately chose one with no cork as well. I don't want cork to snap on me at the end of the tasting. So we were all thrilled at just how quickly these dram packs sold out just a few hours after they went on sale, which was absolutely fantastic. Couldn't believe that. As such, Derek has again very kindly delved into the rather incredible inventory of stock at his disposal, and has donated 5 more bottles for us to do this all again in, I think, 3 weeks' time. All the information is now on the Leith Spirits website, so I'm absolutely thrilled to announce there'll be a second virtual tasting, again with all the money raised from the sales of these dram packs going towards the continued production of the sanitizer here. It's going to be on, I think it's Tuesday the 26th. Is that right? Tuesday the 26th, 7:30 at BST again. Again, live streamed here on the Rosebank blog Facebook page. The dram packs are now live on the Leith Spirits website. That's www.leithspirits.com/events. That's leithspirits.com/events. And I can give you a bit of an insight into the lineup. It's totally different to tonight's lineup, but hopefully equally as interesting, if not more so. We're going to start with 1976 north of Scotland. That's a closed grain distillery. That's 1976 cask sample. So that would be around about 43, 44 years old, something like that. Then we're going to move on to a 1938 Glenlivet, bottled by Gordon MacPhail at 35 years old. Then we're going to move on to a 1968 Bunnahabhain 50-year-old. Again, that's bottled by Glenmore as part of their rare find range. That's going to be the third dram in that lineup. I'm salivating just talking about this. The penultimate whisky is going to be a 1953 Talisker, bottled by Gordon MacPhail at 24 years old. And then we'll finish off with probably a whisky that nobody's interested in, just a Port Ellen. We're going to finish on a 1983 Port Ellen 33-year-old. And again, that's part of the Glenmore Spirits Rare Find range. So those dram packs, there are only 20 available, as you can imagine, due to the very limited nature of that liquid. It's a 1 bottle per whisky tasting. That's all we have. So head over just now. They are priced at £150 per pack. Like I say, every single penny raised from the sale of those packs will go towards helping Leith Spirits continue the production of their sanitizer. I'm going to head off and enjoy a little dram of this Mortlach 12-year-old from the 80s. Thank you very much again for joining me this evening. Slainte.